Hey everyone, JJ here with Peter from Emil Solutions. Tuning in for our broadcast today of talking about Bubble databases, everything you need to know about building databases in Bubble. Um, Peter, did I say your name right? Let's just start there.
Petter or Peter, I'll respond, whatever you say.
I'm sorry about that. So Petter was, one of the OGs in this space. I originally read his book. I learned satellites from him as well, and I use that into all of the way I build databases today. You'll hear a lot about satellites today. So thankful to have you on and for your guidance, especially in those early stages. It's going to be fun to see how we think through this database that we're going to be creating together, the decisions that we're making, why we're making it, and how we're kind of approaching it. So that's really the gist of this call today is just let's get into a UI. Let's get into Lucidcharts. Let's start putting together these schemas, talk through the decisions we're making, and we'll take it from there.
I look forward to it. So thanks for the invitation. I think this is
Of
going to be very
course.
much fun.
Yeah, of course. Before we get started, where can people find out more about you? And then we'll do that again at the end.
Well, I'm pretty available, and at the same time, I'm not. I'm poor at answering stuff,
Okay.
which you'll find sometimes. I'm just terrible at it. But I am on Twitter. You can find me there on the Amlie Solutions handle. I have the amliesolutions.com, which is my website where you can email me. If you just write something in the forum, I won't see it. But if you tag me, I will, because I'm there occasionally, and I'm happy to answer most things. As soon as at least if I have something to offer, I'll be happy to answer it. So yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I try to put your links to the books that you did as well. You did a book on database and security. I'm rereading the security one now as we speak. I'm getting ready for another course on that. So it's thick, but it's good.
Turned out longer than I planned for sure. Yeah. But
Funny
I
how
think
that
at
works.
least it's pretty complete.
Yeah, I would definitely say that. All right, so Rico, welcome. Always good to have you here, my friend. Michael, welcome. All my other friends here, thank you for joining us. Much appreciated. There will be a replay of this event. I will send it in a recording. You guys signed up an email, so I'll send it to the email. It'll also be on the YouTube channel. So don't worry about that. So let's get into it. Without any further ado, I'm going to add our screen. Here we go. So I included the Figma links so you guys can follow along with this design. We'll be doing a Figma link, and then we'll get into our ERDs as well and start building out these types. The goal really isn't to build out this entire thing. It's more so talking through these main relationships and just figuring out, what makes sense. Okay. So let's get started right away, and we'll get into our user type here. So as I go through these flows, I'm seeing we need some kind of full name, email. We have some social connections. I'm going to just continue going through these flows. And yeah, phone number, email, full name. Anything else that I might be missing here so far, Pete? Petter?
The first thing I'm thinking here is kind of just to emphasize, which I often do in my articles and books and stuff, is just to say the importance of planning here, because you have a design, and this looks great from an end user perspective, right? But this is a food delivery app. There is someone who is going to deliver this food as well. They'll want to log in. So I'm thinking the first thing we may want to think about is kind of how do we separate these users from each other? And how many different kinds of users do we have? We have at least clients, and we have maybe an admin who adds this stuff, the food. Maybe the restaurants have an admin. I'm not sure. And there may be need for some kind of super admin user, which is whoever created the app or the team that runs the app.
Yeah, so for that, we would use a user role, right?
I think what would make sense here is probably an option set, or
yeah.
So
So
not complicate things
option
too
set
much.
for user role. So I label all of my option sets with OS in front of it, just so I know that it's an option set in the dropdowns. And then for this, we'll do an admin, we'll do a delivery driver, and then we'll also do, I don't know how to format this right, but for an option set, and then orderer or customer, whatever that might be. Does that feel about right there?
Yeah, let's not complicate things. So let's say these are our three roles.
Okay, awesome. So, and then over here, we'll connect that to the user, user role, and then this would be OS user role. Awesome. Yep, that's a great place to start there. So we have our full name, our phone, our email, our user role. What I also really like to do here, even though this design, it doesn't seem like there's really much on the user. I like to set up my satellite for my user now, which I normally call my user expanded, because I feel like if you start this foundation in the beginning, it puts a really good place for you to grow in the future. Meaning, we all know that the user data type is carried with us in every single page load, right? And so that's just weight that you're carrying with you. Now, you want to make sure that that is as light as possible because that's every page load you're bringing that. And so by having a customer expanded type, you can throw in all the data for the user that you don't need on every single page load. Maybe like a date of birth, maybe like things like that, maybe address, depending on how you need to get there, but things like that that will help you. And so right now, it doesn't look like you would need an expanded because there's just maybe 5 to 10 fields. And you don't really need a satellite for that. But I like putting this foundation now so that way, as your user grows over time, you already have this foundation in place to just throw it to the expanded or to the user, depending on what's best at that time, rather than say, I'm going to load up my user, it gets 15, 20 fields. Now it's time to make the expanded, and then I got to change everything at that point.
I think that makes sense. Yeah, especially in application where you save a lot of data on the user.
Yeah.
I think if you're using the expanded section to store yes, no values and numerical values, small stuff like that, then I'd rather keep it on the user.
Sure.
But in this case, I think it also makes sense to do it the way you suggest because of the security issues, because we have some different user roles here and they are very different, right? So
Yeah.
the admin user is, a completely different user type from the client user or the customer user in this case.
Yeah.
In which case, setting up privacy rules would be pretty simple because we can just keep this data type completely separate from everything else, making sure that you never get access to something on the user field which you're not supposed to or you don't need, really.
I think that's a great point. That's another really good way to look at why these expanded and satellite types provide help in that manner. It makes security easier, right? Because you can really get into those privacy rules and restrict those even further.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
A lot of folks, when workflow units were launched, they're like, oh man, does this mean satellites don't do anything anymore? Like, because it's going to take more work units to create the satellites and to manage the satellites, right? And now I have my response to that, but what is your response?
Well, I'd say generally for the workload unit, I would say the initial kind of anxiety that everyone got as they launched this with these missed calculations that weren't really where they should be.
Yeah.
I think for most applications, the workload units aren't that big of a problem anymore. So I think I want to kind of tone down the anxiety that people are feeling that I'm spending too much of this on this, on this, on this. Of course, you should think about it, but I'd rather have an app that performs well and then look at things as the app gains users and look what exactly is spending workload units and then kind of try to optimize that instead. So I'm thinking this through mostly from a security and performance perspective, really.
Yeah.
So satellite data types, for example, they still make good sense because you can avoid downloading a lot of data that you don't need. So
Boom.
for
And that's on
those,
every page load, potentially everywhere, rather than, the 1 or 2 times you need to create and manage that satellite.
yeah, and just to illustrate what a satellite data type does in terms of performance, it's usually not the singular records we're worried about, right? It's if you download, let's say you're an admin, you download a list of users, and let's just, for the sake of it, say that each user has a 10,000 character blog post saved on them, right? That list would be pretty slow to load because you'd be downloading all of this data, which just makes no sense. In that case, I would definitely move that to a satellite data type. So for searching, stuff like that. But to download single records, especially if it's a mobile app, you want to keep the data load as small as possible. And if you have one blog post saved on one user with 10,000 characters, it's not much data at all, right? So when thinking about satellite data types, I mostly focus on lists and large volumes of data and not single records.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great way to say it. And we're going to come back to those lists in our restaurant listing here. We'll get back there in actually a couple of minutes. But yeah, I think that's a great way to say it. The big thing that I say is It's your searches. You're searching on your list for all your RGs and everything like that. If you're doing it with a satellite, it's just returning less data, which is saving you workflow units, right? And
Yeah, for sure.
And not only that, but it's also making it quicker because it's just loading less data to the page, and it's more secure because it's loading less data to the page.
Exactly. Yeah. And also from a workload unit perspective, a search, because what great thing about Bubble is that searches are dynamic, right? So if I download a list of users and then I add 10 new users, you will instantly see them on screen. Most people, you've
Yeah.
seen this in your apps.
Yeah.
And of course, that consumes workload as well, right? So if you can keep the data that's repeatedly changing in a satellite data type, you don't need to do these follow-up queries every time you look at the list. Because if we take an extreme example there, if you download a list of users, let's say you download all 10,000 of them,
Yeah.
and then these users, all of them start typing away and adding stuff to their, and then the guy looking at the list goes to lunch for an hour. You're continually spending workload units just downloading new data to the page, which is it's not huge. It's not a completely new query, but it's complete waste, right? You're not. It doesn't give you anything. So you could think about it that way too.
Yeah.
Think about if a search can remain kind of static in the way that you don't constantly ping the server for new information.
I love it. Another thing that I see with people using satellites and a mistake that they might make is they have, maybe just for an example here, I'll show. So they have like the user, right? And then they have the user expanded. And say that, they're doing a repeating group using the user expanded. And, they have their parent user saved here, right? So parent user, and that is user. And so they need maybe like the full name from the user. So then what they'll do is they'll reference the parent to get that full name in that repeating group, which essentially means they're loading the satellite, but then they're also loading the main type as well to get all of that. And then it defeats the purpose of the satellite.
Not only defeats it, but you've actually made things worse. Right?
You make things worse.
So
yeah.
It's the worst setup you could have. Yeah.
Yeah.
So think about what you place in. If you save your first name on the user expanded, you're not doing this the right way.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. So that's a thing to avoid. Satellites are here to, and they really become handy when you have your UI and you can say, okay, what is exactly the things that I need to show here, and only put that and then nothing more, because you're just trying to really populate these RGs, or these listings of just the main types that are showing, the main fields that are showing a lot of listings without actually loading everything else, right? So you want to keep your satellites as light as possible. And then your main record can get a little bit more chunky because your satellite is serving the purpose for your listings.
And I think it's useful to see this from a user story perspective, just classical user stories, is that when you think about what's on the main thing or whatever you show in the list, whether that's your satellite or your main data type, that's up to you. But what do you need saved on that record to show in the search results, right? And in a list of users, obviously we would need to show their name, right? So you don't save the name on the extender or the satellite data type. And then what would you like to show when you click that user, for example? You're taken to somewhere else, maybe a user profile. What do you need there, right? So the goal of satellite data types is not to set up satellite data types. The goal is to think about how you can kind of spread your data load over multiple steps, and to think about, will anyone click every user and open every single user profile? It never happens, right? But they will download all the users that they see in that list and then click them. So think about that. Step one, search. What do you want to show here? What do you need in the search results? That's the lightweight data type. And the heavy data type is the user editing or the user profile, whatever you need to see. And when you look at the screen you have in front of you right now, where it says, what would you like to order, in the middle there, here we have some search results like featured restaurants, right? You don't need to load their entire menu. You need this photo, you need maybe the reviews, you need the McDonald's, the name of the restaurant, all of this information. You would save that on the light data type. Everything else comes in the next step when you click that restaurant, right? So I think that's a good way to think about it. What do I show in the search?
Yeah. And to answer this question real quick, it's attached to the user, yes. And so when it goes to load the user here, so we see the user expanded, you're only loading the unique ID of this record, but not all of the fields of this, unless you call for this specifically. So the unique ID is what, like 24 kilobytes or something really, really small. So you can save unique IDs all day long in a one-to-one relationship. And it just helps you avoid loading everything else a part of this as well. So hopefully that helps to answer your question there. I think one last thing is with the satellites, I don't know what you prefer, but I always like to have a two-way relationship on my satellite. So I have, my satellite here, I'm saving the relationship to my satellite, and then I'm saving the relationship to my parent back to it, because it just makes things so much easier. Again, it's just 24 KBs you're saving. But if you like when you get into managing a production application and you're in your database views and you're trying to fix data, you need all the tools you can to find the connections between all these. And by saving this record there, then you can easily constrain that in your database views and then see, whatever that makes sense. And so you can modify and fix your data better in the backend if you ever need to.
Completely agree with that. And it's also it's bytes, right? It's not kilobytes even. So
Bytes,
it's just incredibly small. And I'd like to see also use the sentence, you're doing your future self a favor. Because at one point you need to find everything connected to this user, something like that. It's just so much quicker. I don't see any single reason why you wouldn't just has a two-way connection there.
Right. It makes life easier. And like, we're not trying to build apps to build apps. We're trying to build apps to solve problems for our users. And then that also means we need to build apps that are easy to maintain and service, so we can continue to solve problems for our users rather than just fix our own problems because we didn't set it up right in the beginning.
Yeah. And that's a great point you're making there, because one of the things that people are kind of almost feel guilty for setting up their database in a way that seems messy to the user. But as you say, you're not creating a database for the user, you're creating an app. It doesn't matter what they see, right? Your app is just a polished user interface on top of a database. And that database should be whatever it needs to be to give a great user experience. And of course, a great user experience is secure and it's fast, right?
Yeah.
So never mind how the database is structured.
Yeah. I think generally you just want to load the data that you need to load when you need to load it and nothing else, right? So like if you need 50 cents, give me 50 cents. I don't want $1 or whatever. Just give me the 50 cents, and you're just loading the data you need when you need it, nothing more. And when they go to do the next thing, then you can load that data. When you go to the next thing, they can load that data. And maybe you can start prefetching that data in certain points once the page is loaded entire or whatnot. But you don't want to load so much that you overwhelm the user before they need any of that, because then the user experience is going down and it's less secure.
Exactly. Yeah. And the user doesn't know about the user expanded data type, right? No. They just see whatever they need to see on the screen.
Yeah. Yeah. To get to this question with Michael, good to see you. Another great bubble dev. How many fields do you generally limit to your data type for satellite light data type? Yeah. So it depends, right? But you don't want 20 plus fields on a satellite. That's kind of defeating the purpose of the satellite, So it's, I ideally like less than 10 fields on a satellite. But that would mean that the parent would need, like, to make sense, like, 20 fields or more, right? So it's weird. There's no like yes or no. There's no binary thing of 0 and 1s. It's just what makes sense for your build and what doesn't. Again, I think it goes into forecasting the future. If your user type is really small and you just don't ever envision it getting really big, then maybe you're good. And maybe you don't need to set up that user expanded to just do that, right? It depends on, your app, your scenario, what you're solving, and if it's going to be needed or not. But usually whenever I can see a data type getting over 15 fields, 20 fields, I'm like, okay, I'm just going to put my satellite in place there, and it's going to protect me from making sure that these repeating groups that are loading these data types and these fields are going to stay performant and not get less bogged down as this data type grows. What about you?
Yeah, I'd say kind of the same thing. It makes your editing experience a lot easier too in the bubble editor. That is, not just if you go into the user data type, you don't want to see 200 fields. Then again, servers are pretty fast, right? So there's no hard limit that says you can have 20, but you can't have 21, of course, right? So I would also consider the total data weight, which is, the amount of especially unstructured data. That's what slows things down and makes the download big. So, I think you could set up a user data type with 200 fields and one with 20 and compare the two. And I don't think the difference would be huge. Once you gain 1,000 users, 10,000 users, you might start to see it, and you might start to see it on download size if the fields contain a lot of unstructured data.
Yeah.
So the number of fields, I don't think I have a set rule for that really. I just consider the weight in total, and as you said, what is this field going to be used for? How can I break up this in steps like we're doing here with user and user expanded?
Yeah. Yeah. I think a big thing for that is, probably just talking about list fields quick, if this was a list of things and say this was a list of, on this list, we had 5,000 records, right? So that would mean that whenever we load this user, which is every single page load, we would also load the unique ID for 5,000 things, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Which is a lot.
Right? It's a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah.
And I offer this service where I audit Bubble applications, and I'm seeing so many user types that are really, really heavy, and they have a lot of lists on them. And I'm just like, you got to get those lists off your type because it's not doing you any good. And you're loading hundreds of things, and yeah, it's just a unique ID for those hundreds of things, but you don't need that on every single page load with you.
Yeah, it's a good point. And from a security perspective too, if you can avoid showing the unique ID of something, you may want to avoid it. So you're not revealing the unique ID of 30,000 users. That gives a hacker some information about your app.
Right.
They may not be able to use that information for anything, but potentially they could if you have some vulnerability in your app, right? So, if you can hide that, I would try to do that.
Yeah. Another question, then we'll continue building this from Anthony. Anthony, I hope this is the case, right? That we're able to dictate the fields that come back in our searches with Bubble one day, right? Like that would be fantastic. That would probably end satellites in some way, maybe, because then we could be very specific about, what we're returning and not returning. And that helps with performance, that helps with security, that helps with optimization, all that kind of stuff. So I hope we get there. But disclaimer, I've been talking with them about that for 2 years now. So I don't know if we're going to get there. Do you have any insights on that, Petter?
No insights really. Just that it's not that long ago that I heard that they are still working on it. So whatever that tells you, I've been hearing that for years as well. I think when it comes from what I've seen, it's probably going to be automated. So it's going to be, obviously it's not going to download whatever's hidden by privacy rules, but it's just going to download whatever's needed. And if you open up a new field on the screen, it's going to download just that one field.
Yeah. So they're going to automate that for us. And I think that follows what Bubble does for us, right? Like they automate those kind of decisions to make things a little bit easier, which is, beneficial. But for some power users like us, we'd probably want to know what that is and control that a little bit more. But still, that would be a welcome improvement to just download the fields that are being asked for in that call rather than all fields.
And as you say, this could remove the need for satellite data types, maybe. Which is, let's not forget, it's a workaround, right?
Yeah.
It's not optimal. It's a workaround that we set up to overcome some shortcomings of the current iteration of Bubble.
Yeah. And unfortunately, this is just one of those. There's quite a bit of it.
We have a few of those. Yeah.
All right, let's keep going here. I want to get to this restaurant type specifically. So we'll come back to this a little bit. So we have this page here. And on this page, we have categories. So burger, donuts, pizzas, etc. And then we have our restaurant listing. All right. So for this, I want to start with building out our restaurant listing. And then let's talk about how we would do this category. Okay. So I'm going to come over here. I'm just going to copy and paste that. Now, if you don't mind helping me figure out what fields I need to add here. Can you see the screen on your side or no?
I see it.
Okay. So for our restaurant, what do we have? We have our name of restaurant, right? We have reviews.
We have a review score. We have also a review count if we want to show that.
Yeah. So let's come back to reviews after we finish filling out this type here, because I think that's a bigger conversation of how we can approach that. And then we have reviews, we have the total, the count, we have the name, and then we have, delivery time, which is interesting. This delivery time, is this an option set for you? How would you do this?
I guess it depends a little bit. if there are just really 3 available times, like 10 to 15 minutes, 20 to
30 to
25,
60,
or
1 to 2
yeah,
hours.
something, yeah, then yeah, I think option set would probably be the quickest way to do that. A
Yeah.
free delivery is probably just a yes, no, maybe an option set if there are.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say that. Now for my yes or no field, I always do a YN in front of it just to alert me that that is a yes or no type as well. And so I find that that just kind of saves me a little bit in the background when I'm searching for the results there. So I'll do YN free delivery yes or no, and then I'll come back to this delivery time. And I think for that we need to create another user role. Sorry, an option set, and that would be option set delivery time. And then this could be, 10 to 15 mins, 15 to 30 mins. My formatting is not perfect. Uh, it's not important for me. What's important is that we can help you guys learn more about this. So don't.
Just insert one thought for those who are building international applications on this, that you may want, you are in the US, and the apps, I guess, are probably mostly focused on the US.
Yeah.
If you're planning for an international launch or something like that, you may want to avoid putting your language into an option set like this, for example. So you may want to save just 10 to 15, and then it's, well, some other word in another language where you would use the app text feature instead. Just wanted to throw that in there.
That's good insight. Yes, I've only worked within the US for this stuff. So so you're saying avoid essentially using your language in your option sets in your database in that way?
Yeah, if you're going to translate the app. If not, you're over engineering things. But the option set in this case would say 10 to 15. And the expression, I guess, would say option set 10 to 15 space app text minutes.
Yep. Boom. Yeah, I love that. That's a great insight there. All right, and then we have some categories that this applies to. Now, with these categories, this is a good thing of like, are we going to do this as a data type itself, or are we going to do it as an option set? And I think it could be both ways, but what would you start with?
I think in this case, we have a few things to think about. One is that if you look at that list, burger, chicken, fast food, that's a list of categories that you'll have to store somewhere. So I would ask myself, will that list change over time? So let's say you add something rare, Cuban food or something like that you don't, you may not have that at launch, but maybe you have it 2 years down the road. In that case, we may want to have this dynamically. So you may want to save those in the database. Then again, it would slow down this load. So I think my initial hunch here is to use the database to save these categories. And then the list of tags that we're looking at here, which is probably a repeating group, I think it would actually save this as a list of texts. And just say burger, chicken, fast food. That's
List
3
of
words.
texts.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. So you'll have it on the data type. You'll have a data type with it, but then you'll just save it as a list of text.
Yeah.
So you don't have to load that data type
Go.
with this. Is that why?
Exactly. Yeah. Because here we have to look up 3 different records of the category data type.
Yeah.
To see what their name is, right?
Yep.
Which kind of defeats the purpose of making this lightweight satellite search type. So, but saving as text is basically just loading a text, but saving as a list of text allows us to show this in a repeating group.
Yeah.
Kind of
Which is
fashion
essentially like an option set anyways, loading that list of text. It's kind of as light as that, but it's a little bit more flexible over the long term.
Yeah. So one of the risks, of course, is if you keep changing the underlying records. You change burger into hamburger, and you'd have to update all of these records. But for the sake of a speedy load on this, which you really want on a mobile app, I would consider doing it that way, yeah.
Yeah. Another thing I like to bring up is if you do this as its own data type, that means within your admin dashboard, the people operating your business can go in and manage that and add new categories. And you don't need a developer to do that, right? And so it makes it more maintainable and serviceable in the long run to be able to set it up this way. But like Petter was saying, you get the benefits of if saving the list of text, you still get the speed benefits that way. So it seems like a win-win, except for the fact that if you ever need to update that, that would be a pain, but that can still be manageable as well.
It can be done, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And they probably won't, right? These will probably remain fairly static.
Yeah. And you could also go with an option set here, but the option set means that maybe you have I don't know, like 50 to 75 of these different types, and so that will be loaded on every single page load, right? 50 to 70 things, because of that's an option set that's loaded every single page load, and then whenever you need to add or modify it, then the admin, the engineer has to go in and do that, right? And so that in itself creates friction for the operator of the application.
Exactly. Yeah, you would need a developer to do that, and especially if you're delivering this to a client, it's one less question you have to talk about it later, like after launching. One less maintenance task. So
yeah, all right,
and
let's do
the
that.
option sets are part of the files that are cached. So here we can think about the kind of customer journey again. Customers would be caching the option sets, so they just load it on the first page load. But then again, this is an app that probably gets a lot of new users, hopefully, because they want to acquire new users all the time. So the first page load they would do would have to download all of these tags, which takes a little bit of extra time. So
list of text. There we go. So what we do from that is we, when they're creating these categories, they can click whatever categories they want to create, and then we'll add it to this category as a list of text from that.
Yeah, exactly. We'll generate a list of texts from the name of the category.
Awesome. So we got we're there. Okay. So last thing we're missing is just a cover image for this. Cover image. And then let's talk about this review. So this is fun. You can do this a lot of ways. I have my preferred way. So we have the overall average and then the count of this. What is your preferred way to do this?
I'm not sure if I'm getting the question. How to display it, you mean? Or
how
to
to
keep
structure
this
this?
maintained?
Right. So what we could also create another data type for reviews, which we'll need to do anyways. But then are we going to save, on this type, a list of reviews? And then on the page load, are we going to do a count of that list and then also average out all of those reviews? Are we going to do that at every page load? Or are we just going to save this statically on the type itself and then manage that relationship in the backend?
No, I would definitely do that statically.
Yeah.
So especially after the workload unit launch, this would take up a lot of workload if we have to calculate this on every cell in this repeating group of restaurants.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I would do the same thing. So, okay, cool. So it's going to take up more processing speed, and you're going to have to build out this operation. So anytime you create a new review, then that review would be created, and then you would modify these records to update the count and to update the average. But that's only happening when a new review is created, and then it's saving you all of those operations on page loads of not doing the counts and not doing the averages and every single page load for your application. So yes, you have to do more work on the back end once that review is created, but you're just doing that once rather than all those operations and every single page load.
Exactly. Yeah.
So 100% there. So I would do, a review score, and that could just be that's a number, and then a review count, and that's a number. And again, this is the relationship that we're managing on the back end here and updating whenever a new review is created. I'll just go off and create this review type quick, just to have it there as a placeholder. We don't need to fill it in fully, but so all right. So we have that restaurant, and we have our delivery times, we have our categories, we have our reviews. Now let's talk about satellite for this, because this itself looks like a satellite, and then we get into the actual details of it all. So we still have a cover image, we still have a name, we still have our reviews, we have pricing, we have quantity, we have description, and then add-ons for all of this. So would you create a satellite for this restaurant, or would you just leave it as is as your parent?
I would create a satellite in this case, and there's a few reasons for that. Again, we're thinking into the future here and looking what kind of problems could we run into here. So first thing is just the search speed, right? We have a longer description here. We have a choice of add-ons, which I guess may be a list search, something like that, which we want to avoid downloading on the left-hand side here. And also for places like this, there may be, maybe you're an admin, you keep adding these restaurants, and you're writing about a restaurant and it's not published yet. So you don't want to publish the information yet, which is worth thinking about, right? Is this a public restaurant? Are people supposed to see it, or is it not public? Plan for this ahead also makes you, or does, you're doing yourself a lot of favors. So I would definitely think about splitting these two up into our satellite data types. The third point there is that this is a very typical use case for something like Algolia search, where thinking about workload units, you could even just offload this whole thing onto Algolia. But as we know, the Algolia, at least the built-in plugin into Bubble, doesn't offer much in terms of privacy rules, constraints, and such like that. And if you're filtering this on the client side, it doesn't make any sense to do that anymore. So you may even delete the data type that is the satellite data type, which comes into the search results, if the restaurant is unpublished, but you're still keeping the main record, which is on the right side. Does that make sense? Because that way you just keep your Algolia database clean, but you're still saving the restaurant. And whenever you publish it, it regenerates the satellite data type, which is there for the searching.
Yeah, I think, Algolia, let's talk about that quick. I think it's a fantastic resource, and you see tremendous speeds when using it, but you can't apply any privacy rules to it. The way it works is by public data, right? And it needs that public data in order to do it. So the second that you need that data to have some kind of security on it, it falls apart, which is a real shame, right? Because it's such a great integration. And I've talked to Bubble's team about this, and they've looked into making this better with engineering, and they just weren't able to do it. And it was a very sad day. But if you're using any kind of like my buddy Dave built an application for the Bubble plugins, and all that stuff was public data, and they used Algolia to power it, and it was really fast, really powerful, and it was good because it was all public data. It was all good, right? But yeah, if you need to add privacy rules to this, then it kind of falls apart there, just generally speaking.
Yeah, and everything is pushed to Algolia continuously. So if you're ever in this situation where you're still working on something, let's say you add a restaurant and you have written the name of the restaurant, but you haven't written the description yet, it'll show up in the Algolia search, which you definitely don't want, right? And again, talking about workarounds, currently the only way to hide something from Algolia in a secure way is really to delete the type altogether, or the record altogether. So, but again, we're talking pretty technical stuff here, and a lot in your first iteration of the app, you may not even consider Algolia. So it's just something, again, I wanted to throw out there.
Yeah. You're talking about deleting stuff, and I get a little worried because I never delete anything. So what I do with deleting is I just archive it. Essentially, I do a yes or no on my archive, and I filter that repeating group, so it's, only bring in archives that is no. And then that way, if the admin on the back end never needs to like take it away from the listing, they'll just have a button to archive, and it'll just archive both, and it's away from everything, but it's still there, and you can bring it back really easily.
Yeah. I think that makes sense in most places, and I tend to do the same. I don't really like to delete stuff. But in this case, we would have another data type, which is the main restaurant data type, where you would be adding a lot of different information. And deleting the satellite data type is it's not a big deal, right? Because it's not really, it doesn't contain anything of permanent value. Everything is there on the main data type. So whenever you click publish on the main data type, we would just recreate the satellite and just get it out there. Because that way, regardless of Algolia or not, you're still keeping that search pretty lightweight, because you're keeping the volume of records in the database as low as you can.
All right, let's keep going on this restaurant here. So we talked about, did we talk about our categories? No, we didn't talk about our categories yet. We were talking about, satellite. And so we're going to create a satellite. So this would be a satellite here, and it would just contain these fields, which we already have here. Now I have added a parent here that we can use to now beef up for, the other stuff. Let me just structure this a little bit better so we can see side by side here. And so what I think we're going to need to do is a couple of things. So first, we need to add the relationships between, the satellite, and then so it's going to be, restaurant, just to abbreviate here. And then we'll, do that two-way relationship. So parent, restaurant, and then restaurant. All right, so after that two-way relationship, then we come back here, and now we also have, let's see. Should we finish off this parent before we get to the categories, or do the categories now and finish off the system?
Well, the parent, you mean the restaurants?
Yeah.
Are we missing anything there yet? We have a favorite feature here, the heart there, I guess, which could potentially be slowing things down.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's right. Thank you. Let's talk about this favorite feature. And one of our friends brought it up earlier. Vinay, where are you? All right, so this favorite feature, how would we approach this? Now, when I think about list fields, I think, is this ever going to get more than 100 things, right? So am I ever going to have more than 100 favorited restaurants? And if so, then maybe I'll look at its own kind of data type. But if it's less than 100, I think that it's best to have it on its own list field because I see the performance gains, and just less than 100, it's normally faster than doing a search for a separate type. So what I'm thinking here is I would personally have a list of favorited satellite restaurants on my user type. All right. And then I would display this heart if, this restaurant is a part of that list on my user type. Because I'm already loading that user type and I need to show this. And I only want to show for the restaurant satellite. I don't want to show for the whole parent. I think that's how I would do it. How about you?
Yeah, same way. I'm not sure if there's any other sensible way to do it, really.
Yeah.
You have to store the list somewhere. And
Yeah.
probably if people are favoriting hundreds of restaurants, the feature really loses all its meaning, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's the way to go.
Now, I was saying that I would do it on save the satellite, but it doesn't really matter in that sense because you're just loading the unique ID here, right? So you can do it on the actual restaurant itself. Or it does matter because this is a satellite here and you need to see it contains within the satellite, right? That's why it matters.
Yeah, so you could save actually you would save the
Satellite.
you probably have the satellite, I think, because
Yeah,
that's where you would show the icon.
exactly. Restaurant satellites. So then this would be, on the user, we have a list of favorite restaurants. And so if you do go to, on the user over here, maybe they have, favorites, that would just load that list really quickly. You're probably going to have 20 or less, and you just can't get faster than loading a list of 20 or less than having a list compared to its own data type and whatnot. So we have this search finished off. Let's just talk about this category before we get off to this page. So we have categories here. And I think this kind of falls in the line of kind of what we did down here. It would be nearly the same thing. It's its own data type, right? And we can create, manage, and edit that data type, however we want in the back end. And then when we save it, so here's the question now. So now we are, now see, why not store it on the user expanded? Because that means we would need to load the user expanded to then do that. And the user is already loaded. So then it saves you from having to do that additional load because we don't need the user expanded elsewhere on this page so far. So we don't need to load another type to get there. Quick question, logic behind creating an OS for delivery time. That one was on the line for us. We just thought, if there was like 4 or 5 different options of like, within 30 minutes, 60 minutes, etc., we could do it that way. But you can do this multiple ways depending on what's best for your application. So getting back to this category, we talked about creating, its own data type for this. It'd be like, name, icon kind of thing. And then that would be saved to this restaurant as a list of text. Now, that still applies here, right? Because when we click here, then we would, filter this RG by, this text, and it'd be, have to search for contains or is within this list of text, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how we
Yeah.
do it.
Yeah. So that's that structure for this page here. Now, I think the big thing is like this address, right? Where we have it on the user type. And I think we always want to have that on the user type because you're bringing in this address kind of everywhere with you of like your delivery times, restaurants nearby and everything. And so you just want to have that address handy and just ready, loaded with you just to always pull with you, right?
Absolutely. And it's a small text value. You can just include it there.
Yep. Now, do you save the full address or do you break it up into like numbers, street addresses, states, cities? How do you go about formatting this address?
And just from what we're looking at now, I would just go for formatting the address in the standard Google address format.
Yeah.
I would say if you need to split it up into anything more than that, usually means because you're searching in specific ways. So, if you
Like
need to
searching by
search for
city,
users
by
in your
state.
state or your city or whatever,
Yeah.
it would make sense to do so. But from just what we're looking at here, I would just use the regular address.
Yeah. And you can use the extract, to get the user city out of this address. You can extract to get the city and the state. But if you are doing that search a lot, then yeah, it just makes sense to probably just split it up, when you first get it and just avoid doing those extracts every time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So that's our listing page. So we've talked a lot about satellites. We like satellites. It's just an efficient way to build your databases and just loading the data that you need only when you need it. So that finishes that up. Now we're just talking about our parent record here. So we need to add some things to it. We need to add price, and then we got like maybe 15 more minutes. So let's finish off this parent record and then just maybe get into the carts of how we would go about structuring our carts. All right. So let's finish this off real quick. So we got price description, price number, description, text. And then what else do we got? We got list of add-ons. So this is a good one. So list of add-ons, how would you structure that one, Petter?
So could you just zoom in on the add-ons here? So these are basically, yes, I want some extra mass room in this case.
Yeah.
Yeah, it probably makes sense to set these up as database records again, so that they're flexible. I think that's probably the only way to do it because there could be a million of these.
Yeah.
Again, I think
like
when you click,
what are these?
Yeah.
Like, can multiple restaurants use this same mushroom and pull from that, or is this a unique thing for each restaurant?
That's hard to say. I would just intuitively, you could research this, but I would probably set something up for each restaurant because extra cheese could mean something for one restaurant and something else for another one, and just allow restaurants to add all their own add-ons. So Petter's restaurant has green peppers, baby spinach, and mushrooms, and extra cheese, and another one has extra cheese and something completely different. But those extra cheese are different records in the database. I think that makes more sense. This makes it more flexible because maybe one restaurant wants to change it to extra much cheese or something like that.
Yeah,
So,
and also there's a pricing attached to it potentially, so then they need to control their own pricing, obviously,
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. So this would
that's a very
be,
good point.
we'd have an add-on data type, and that add-on data type would be an image, a text, and a price, essentially.
Right, yeah.
Go. Add-on, image, and then image, name, text, price, number, and then add-ons, list of add-ons. All right. So for my professional database course, building out this ERD is the final exam. So I might have to modify this final exam now for those that are following along how to build this out. But yeah. All right. So list of
It may
add-ons.
also be in the final product that you want to connect the add-on to the actual product, not the restaurant. Because you probably don't want extra cheese in all your products, right? So that's just how this example is set up. It depends on how your app is going to function, really.
Yeah.
You could connect it to the restaurant, or you could connect it to the product itself, so that a cheeseburger has an option of extra cheese, but the spaghetti has another option of a spice or something.
Right. So we actually missed that. So I missed it. This is a restaurant, but then we dived into, this is not the restaurant listing. This is the actual like menu item This is the product listing that we're looking at right now, right?
Oh, actually, missed that too. Yeah. Right. We're looking
Yeah,
at the product now.
yeah,
Yeah.
this is the food details. Sorry, I got confused on that. Yeah, so like we clicked on this is a restaurant, yes, but this is a menu item within that restaurant. So this is its own actual data type in itself.
Yeah. So it's just the sequence in the Figma file here is a
Yeah,
little bit strange. So
yeah,
we are looking at a list of restaurants in the left-hand side, but then we go directly into the product in the next slide. So
yeah.
I was confused by it as well.
Yeah, me too. All right, we'll just grab this real quick. So menu items, and we'll just bring some stuff over real quick. Description. Some busy work here. Price, number. All right, so then we can delete some of this stuff. And then what we can also do is just do, right, we'll do a menu items, and this will be a list of their menu items for this restaurant. And this will, no, right there. There we go. So that will be that. And then we could take the add-ons off of this, right? We'd want the add-ons on the menu item itself.
Yeah, so we have a add-on data type. We add that to each product or menu item, as you call it. So
yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So
and then we just
cheeseburger has extra cheese and spaghetti doesn't.
Yep. All right. So we have a restaurant, satellite and parent. We have menu items on that. And now I'm sure each of these menu items itself have a review. So we would have, we can structure our reviews to be good for, menu items and restaurants, right? Like we don't need to create a review for menu items and a review for a restaurant, or is that how you would approach it?
Yeah, I'll probably make it one. And maybe you even want to aggregate the product reviews into the total restaurant review, maybe. So yeah, we could consider splitting the review into types. Maybe you have one for the restaurant overall, maybe you have one for the food or each food item, and maybe you have one for, let's say, speed of delivery, something like that, if you want to make this complex. So type of review right now, we would need just restaurant and food item. I think that makes change.
Yeah, I think for that, we can create an option set. It'd be a type of review on this restaurant, on this review. So it'd be a review for the menu item, a review for the restaurant, a review for the delivery driver, and that would just be an option set dictating that.
Yeah. So I'm not sure I would add that as a list on the menu item. I'd rather search for the review and have that review connected to one menu item.
Now that's interesting. So why would you rather do that? So how many reviews do you think that is going to be on the menu item?
Well, we don't know how many there will be, but the entire list will be loaded anyway. So from a performance perspective, if there are 10,000 reviews, you will load 10,000 unique IDs, right? Which could end up being a lot. But the second thing is that I just feel that I have more control over privacy rules when I perform a search. You can protect the list with a search as well, but you don't get the fine-grained control over each item in the list. So let's again say that a review is under review, for example. Let's say that a restaurant can complain about a review, this isn't fair, something happened, blah, blah, blah.
Interesting.
The admin here would place that review under review. And in that case, we may not want to show it in the list while it's being reviewed. I'm just drawing up an example now, but I think it makes sense to search for the reviews instead, because it'll be just as fast and it will leave out all records that for some reason shouldn't be on the list.
Yeah, I think this applies by the same rules that we talked about earlier with the restaurants. There should be static numbers here. And then we're not showing these reviews here. So whenever we need to actually show the reviews, then we'll click on it and do that search for it then, but we don't need to carry it with us here.
Yeah, exactly. And when you click that see review, if there are 10,000, which is honestly not that unlikely on a restaurant app, you would only load, or if you have a scrolling list, for example, Bubble would only load these as they're needed, right?
Right. Well,
whereas
not only that, but
going.
say that your menu item is hella popular and you get beyond 10,000, your list would break.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, good point. So, and just in general, I think this is not just about reviews, but in general, unless I have a very specific reason to use lists, I rarely do. right?
Yeah.
And there are good reasons to just.
Yeah.
I don't think this is one of those scenarios.
Yeah, agreed totally. Yeah, I try to cap off my list. If it's 100 or less, I'll look to use a list. But if it's anything over 100, I'll just create its own data type for it. So review score number, review count number, and then this will be, we'll need to get back to the parents of this, right? So we'll need, a menu item. So that way we can strain in the search that we get back there, menu item. And then we'll also need, I guess, if we're doing it this way, then my friend, we don't even need the OS type of review, because if, like if the menu item is populated, then that means it's a menu review.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We
Yeah.
could actually get rid of that field.
And then, like this could be, delivery driver, if we got there, whatever that may be, something like that. So then we could delete this because again, what we're saying is if this is populated, then it's a restaurant review. If this is populated, it's a delivery driver review, etc. So we got those reviews. That's awesome. Now, to your point, which I think is a fantastic point, let's plan for this. Like, Arno approved. So essentially you're only showing in the approved ones. Sorry, yes or no, instead of like all. So this gives you the ability for an admin to say no, or the restaurant to say that's not a fair review, and marks it as not approved. It disappears while admin is reviewing it. And then the admin says, oh, no, it is approved. And then they'd say, yeah, bring it back to yes. And then it comes back. So it gives you that flexibility to remove it and take it as you go.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Also, I'd like to bring in a point on workload units here that it's very tempting that each time a review comes in, you want to recalculate the score.
Yeah.
You don't really need to do that. People don't care if the review score is 1 day old, right? You can just do this once per day or once per hour, whatever makes sense. In the beginning, if you have few reviews, maybe you want to do it all the time. But, by being a little bit strategic about how often you review the review score and the review count, because that's basically just to do a search for and a sum or an account, right?
Yeah.
You don't need to do that for every single review that comes in. If you have 10,000 reviews, the score doesn't even change, right? So just wanted to bring that up.
That's a really good point. But then you get into like, how are you managing that reoccurring daily? You like want do you just run that new calculation every single time, even if nothing's changed? Or do you filter that search of like, if the modification date for all this wasn't within the last 24 hours, don't do it. Like it opens up another round of questions. Like I totally agree. We shouldn't be updating this every time, especially for quantity's sake, because that would be excessive. So if you can find one way where every single day you modified the quantity for anything that was new within the last 24 hours, then that would make sense. But how do you get into managing that?
Yeah, so basically what this would look like in the back end, let's just focus on restaurants, for example, and just to forget that there are different kinds of reviews. If we would do this daily, you would have to do this daily on each restaurant. So you would have a recursive workflow or something like that. It works through all of them, which I agree to do daily would be excessive unless all of your restaurants receive reviews every single day.
Right.
So probably I would just make a very easy hack on this. Something like whenever a review is published to a restaurant, you set a yes/no field, recount reviews on that. Right. And you can use that field for whatever you need. So if you are running through restaurants, let's say 12 o'clock, that recounts and recalculates these review scores, it just does that on a list. Do a search for restaurants that has the update reviews to yes. Right. That's one simple way to go.
I think that's a great point. I think that also brings up the point of like, that is a field that we're creating to make our lives easier, and that is okay, right? The things that like, if this is more efficient and we're able to build a better app for them, that's what matters. So yes, it doesn't look pretty. Yes, you don't need it in that way, but if we need to do this to do our own maintenance and to make that maintenance a lot easier, then that's a big win.
Exactly. Yeah. As long as it works.
As long as it works. Tony has a question for you, Petter. When do you use a list?
Well, there are some cases where you kind of have to use them. So let's say you have a project management system, for example, and you have a list of tasks, and those tasks have tags, for example. You would have to save those tags as a list on that task. So Because let's say these tags are due now or due tomorrow, right? Just very basic. You want to filter these, you have to check that list if it's there, and it doesn't make sense to set up searches and complex stuff to do that. So in that case, you basically have to use a list. For performance reasons, I don't really see much reason to use a list specifically. I'm not sure if anyone's done any calculations on this within the last year, but kind of the official statement from Bubble is that its searches are most of the time even faster than lists. So yeah, I think it's a pretty narrow list of scenarios where lists are necessary. But tasks with tags is one of them. That could also be blog posts with specific tags attached to them, something like that.
Awesome. All right, so we're running out of time here. So I just want to get to this cart thing before we get there, and then we'll do a couple questions at the end. But I want to get to
sorry. Could I add one more point to what we're just talking about, just to illustrate? Could you go back to the screen we're just looking at?
This one?
Yeah. So this is another case where you look at the add-ons. We're using list of add-ons on the menu items.
Yeah.
We discussed that we wanted to create one add-on per restaurant, right? Or one list of add-ons per restaurant.
Yep.
But that add-on might be added to multiple products. So this is kind of the same as my tag example, that you want to filter products by add-ons. Let's say an admin wants to do that. You would have to save it as a list, right? The other way around would be to add every menu item on the add-on itself to see where it belonged. So that's another example where a list is just the only way to go, really.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about this cart functionality. So we find, we search for a restaurant, we find a menu item that we like, we add it to our cart, okay? And this is what the cart looks like now. So we have essentially menu items on here. So, and then a quantity of that, and then subtotal and whatnot. And so the first question is, where do we save the cart? Is the cart going to go to our user type? Is the cart going to go to our expanded user? Or are we just going to do a reverse search to get to that user? What do you think?
Well, I like to think of carts in kind of two categories. You have the cart you're looking at right now, and then you have your history. So I think the current cart that you're looking at right now, we should save on the user type, because you want to just bring it up immediately. And then we probably don't need a field on the extended user type. We just have a user type on the cart itself, meaning that if you ever have to look through your order history, for example, we'll know which user it belongs to.
Yeah, I think I like that a lot. I mean, the current cart, so this is really easy. You can, if they're loading the page, you can make it really easy to say, hey, finish whatever's in your cart, so you got something right there, and that makes sense. And then because we are saving the user on the cart itself, whenever they go to like previous carts, you can just do a search for the previous carts. Honestly, I would probably just put the previous carts on the user expanded myself, and I just load that list there. Because but it's not, I think it's a wash. I don't think you're going to see any big thing either way. So that's how I would approach it. Now, I think the cart, we have a really good opportunity here to leverage this functionality even further. And what do I mean by that? Well, we know we need the basic things of, we have a cart and we have menu items. Within those menu items, we need quantities and what is the total price. So like, we know that we can get there, right? So total. But what I'm really interested in is if they purchased it or not, right? So for that, what I would do is say, YN purchase ? Yes, no, because if they haven't purchased it, that's a clear indicator that they're going to go in my sales funnel, and I'm going to sell the emails of text of, hey, you have this cart, that is open still. Send it to them, and here's the menu items, the prices. Do you want to continue? It's easy to forget about, what you need for sales. But I think this is just a reminder that we need these kind of functionalities and attributes in here that will help our sales funnels to convert this item, because our goal here is to get people to buy as much as possible, right? And so if you're not tracking any kind of, is this purchased? When was it purchased? Then you're failing that. And matter of fact, instead of doing this is why I know what I would do is I just do purchase date, right? And then what I'd say is if the purchase date is empty, that's my yes or no field. Otherwise, I'm saving the date that it was actually purchased here as well. And so you can kind of get 2 out of 1 here.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. And you'll usually have some kind of transaction connected to this cart, right? Which is also contains a lot of information. Let's say the Stripe numbers and all that data,
Yeah.
which also tells you how far along this cart is in the process, right?
Yeah. 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 That's another way to. Yeah, that's another good way to do it. But I think just
Purchase date is definitely needed. Yeah.
Yeah. I think the big thing here, though, is that the point that I wanted to stress is we need this for front end functionality to get here, but we also need it for our sales funnels. We also need it to track how many people made it to the cart and actually bought compared to those that didn't. And then do we have a conversion problem with this cart because of bad rates or good rates? Like you need to store that data. So think ahead when you're building your database. Don't just think about what is the core functionality needed, but what are the things that I could do for core functionality? And what else can I do to give my team more information so they can start to track this? And maybe that's when you get your team involved. You go to your sales team and say, hey, when looking at this cart, what are some things that you want to track? What does success look like for you? Then let's set up those metrics ahead of time to make sure that we're storing and accounting for that when we build this feature from the beginning.
That's a very good point. I totally agree.
Awesome. So let's end it here on our build. We got through a good bit. We talked about satellites a lot, but I hope that's pretty clear now. I hope you guys enjoyed this build. There was a lot of stuff here that we talked about. I'm gonna just remove my screen. Any last questions before we get out of here? I'll go through it. So I'm not sure if you can do this. Can we save this in a cache rather than a database? Like, you can cache it in like a ghost user, but I don't know if they're.
Yeah. So I would not save it in a temporary way. I'd like to keep the cart for as long as you say, you may want to send a drip email, something like that. Do you want to finish your cart? So you could do that. I don't see in some products maybe it's worth doing. In the case of this restaurant app that we're looking at, I would absolutely save it for permanent record and keep it up to date.
Yeah, agreed. How about Greg here? So would it be better to have an extended data type for user or search info data type made specifically for search results, profile pic, name, or I would do an extended data type. I try to avoid doing searches as much as possible. I think for this extended data type, it's just an easy, you load that unique ID, and whenever you need it, you can just segue over to that type and pull in that information without doing a search. It's easy enough. It's not a big thing for me. You're just loading one record. What do you think, Petter?
Yeah, again, the list of users will probably never be loaded on the front end. So this is kind of an admin thing, right? If you're loading a list of users, you're probably either a restaurant owner or a super admin or something like that. So
oh, I didn't read it like that. Okay, I see.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think maybe we interpreted the question in a different way. I'm not sure I understand the question, to be honest.
Okay.
Would it be better to have an extended data type for user or a search info data type made specifically for search results? Oh, yeah. Okay. No, I think I get the question. So should the satellite be an extended version of the current user, or should you set up a satellite data type that is purely for searching? I think that is the question. I don't think there's a straightforward answer to that. It would depend on what you need to search for. I think the setup we have now with a pretty lightweight user, and again, going back to security, maybe on the back end, you would need to save additional information on each user where it makes sense to kind of hide it away in a satellite search data type.
Yeah.
I don't think it's entirely straightforward. I would say both cases are just as valid, really.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. So that will do it for this. Petter, thank you for joining us. I really appreciate it. I will try and put your links where people can find you, whenever I post this video and whatnot. I already posted your Twitter link above, so check him out there. I'll just do it again real quick, just to anyone that wants to follow you. He's a great follow. You got a great blog. You recently helped Bubble update the documentation, so thank you for that. God knows they need more help there, so thank you for that, doing God's work. So thank you. You also helped recently with the Bubble certification, help them build their certification. Do you want to say like a couple quick words about that process? as it's getting ready to be open to the public soon?
You mean the certification specifically?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I helped, kind of set up the certification in terms of what kind of questions do we want to ask, and we wanted to get relevant scenarios, all of that. I guess the main thing I want to say about it is the feedback we've received so far is pretty good. But I hope everyone can just agree that we see this as a version 1, right? So if you take the certification and you're just enraged that this is not what you wanted, you didn't understand the questions, they were totally irrelevant, something like that, we're totally open to feedback, right? So see this as a first version, send us feedback, and we'll continue to update this as new features come in and as we get user feedback. So yeah.
Great. Yeah.
And also, please check out the updated manual, because there's a lot of hours have gone into updating that, and we're not finished yet, just to be straight.
I recently built this tool. I'm going to post in the thing. It's a bubble certification that I took from the updated manual. I created 90 questions from the updated manual and then created this quiz. And then if you get something wrong, I show you the right one. And it's totally free in preparation for your quiz that you built for bubble certification. So this is like, if you want to take that quiz, I just posted in the chat. It's a good way to test yourself before spending the $50 to take the bubble certification one, to fine tune your skills there. But otherwise, Petter, you've been amazing for the no-code community, Bubble specifically. Thank you for all you've done since like 2016, 2017 now?
16, yeah.
You're an OG. Thank you for guiding the way for the rest of us, and thank you for joining us today. Everyone else for joining us, thanks for following along our YouTube channel, No Code Alliance. Follow me on Twitter at JJ Englert, and everything else. So thank you for tuning in today, guys, and we'll catch you in the next one. See ya.